Good morning. Ready to go.
Move it back just a little. Thanks.
So, good morning to everyone here today. Now, I have noticed that the fewer we have here, the more views there are on YouTube and probably on Zoom. So, welcome to all of you here. Beautiful day, snow on the mountain there, Pikes Peak, and we have heat in the building, so good. You hope so? Okay, that's good. We got water? Okay, so the boiler is boiling. All right, so today is the faith of David. This is a young pipsqueak David, young David here. Okay, do I have this on? It helps if you have it on. Now it works. Last week we did David's great-grandmother, Ruth. And we followed that line there, Ruth, Obed, went to David. So today we're going to be studying David. And if you notice the path in December's lesson, there sort of follows the path to the Christ. Yes. And then after that, we know that after he was born, wise men came from the east to the house and brought gifts there. Okay, fear and courage. Do they go in opposite directions? No, not necessarily. There's two rooms. Room A has two lions. Room B has two kittens. Does it take courage to go in the room with the two kittens? If you're allergic to them. All right. So we have the fear of the entire Israelite army because of this one giant. And then we have the courage of a young man. But can you have courage without risk or fear?
I don't think so.
No. You got to have something in there that gives you courage by definition.
You're not afraid.
What's that?
It's
Not courage if you have nothing to fear. No. Courage. Does it require courage to teach your Bible class? If you've never done it before? Getting up to speak. So that's why it's sometimes good if you just help. Be a helper at first. Courage by definition is exercised at the risk or the fear of something. And sometimes you can be risking your freedom or even risking your life. If there's no risk involved, there's no courage involved. So one of the greatest, recognition of courage in this country is the next slide. Courage makes fear sit in a corner and behave. So this sort of gives you that idea. You got to have fear. You just manage your fear. So here's that slide I meant to say. The greatest honor you can have. Anyone recognize what that is? The Medal of Honor. Do they give those out like candy?
Not hardly.
Not hardly. Sometimes it's at the cost of your life. There are three of them. Your bottom right is the Army, who I think won yesterday, right? Beat the Navy. They also beat Air Force. And then at the top is Navy and Marines, and then there at the sort of center is the Air Force. It's one of the only awards, I think it's the only award which is actually presented by the President of the United States. So only U.S. servicemen members who distinguish themselves through conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life. You know, everyone can pretty much risk their lives, but you're going above and beyond the call of duty. You're doing something that if you didn't do it, they wouldn't condemn you for. You went above and beyond the call of duty and probably, thrown yourself on a hand grenade, then you get the posthumous one, right? So that's an award for courage. It has,
They talked about the other day where that shooting was at the campus in Nevada, Las Vegas.
Mhm.
The officer in charge said, our officers did not have to think. They always run to where the shooting is coming
Yeah.
from, which is a sense of, well, I'm sure they were afraid, but also courage overrides the fear.
where the officers, when they're shooting, when they're saying people run away from it, our people run to it. Yes, courage. Okay, today's lesson takes place, or as we said, it's after the time of Ruth. It occurred sometime before 1010 BC. 1010 BC is when David becomes the king of Israel, replacing Saul after he was killed in battle with the Philistines. Okay, so sometime, probably, I think about 15 years before that. So we're about, say, 990 BC, something like that. The Lord has rejected King Saul. He did not fully obey the Lord's command to totally wipe out the Amalekites. He brought back the king and some of the things. He didn't obey the Lord, so Samuel tells him that he has been rejected as king. So, Saul, while he was king, he looked upon David with favor for a time, but that would change when David becomes more popular than he is. Okay, and then when the Lord rejected, when Saul was anointed king, he had the Spirit of the Lord upon him and he could prophesy. But once David was anointed, then that Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul and it was replaced with a harmful spirit. And to ease that harmful spirit, they found someone to soothe it with music, and David played the lyre for him. And then he was that was a stringed instrument. And he also served as one of Saul's armor bearers. That's from 1 Samuel 16:21. So David, the Israelites and the Philistines are in battle. They have their battle lines together. And that's when this story takes place today. He comes and he visits there. He's coming to visit his brothers to bring them some supplies. And he sees their morale is really low. The Israelites are down because there's this Philistine, this giant Philistine that's coming out twice a day and taunting them. And the Israelites are just scared to death. David comes out and he hears Goliath, this taunt. And he asks around and finds out that, hey, there's a reward for anyone that's willing to go up against this giant and kill this giant. Now we know that David fought lions and bears, didn't he? He talks about that as a shepherd, young shepherd. He was a good shepherd. He cared for his sheep, for the flock. Now here's an interesting. Which of these animals could you fight off barehanded? Okay? Can any of you go hand to paw with a ferocious house cat? You know, I've been bitten. It's not that bad. Lion, grizzly bear? I haven't been attacked by any of them. I have been attacked by a rooster. Anybody been attacked by a rooster? Yep. I went to Ashley's parents over the summer. And there by the door of the house, there was a cane. And I knew neither one of them used a cane. What's it there for? He said, oh, when our grandson, 10-year-old grandson comes to visit, he used that to protect himself from the roosters. They attack. What about a goose?
Oh, yeah.
Goose, they are protective.
My wife was attacked by a goose.
Yeah. Dick, you play golf. Has that ever happened to you?
Not quite, almost.
Look at the guy in the middle. He thinks it's funny, doesn't he? I know there's some geese out by Nancy Lewis Park. I don't know if there's geese. Are there geese out there by the?
Oh,
Yeah. You accidentally pick up a goose egg instead of a golf ball? What does the guy do? What does the goose do? Yep,
He plays through and goes on to the 16th
Yeah.
hole.
yeah. Can you say he goosed that hole? Whatever. Okay, here's the results. I wonder about the people. 6% say, well, I can handle a grizzly bear, or a lion, or a crocodile. Maybe Crocodile Dundee, maybe Steve Irwin while he was alive. But kind of interesting. So which creature was responsible for the most human deaths? Now, Neva knows. Huh? Cattle? No, it's the ferocious mosquito. More people die from mosquito bites than anything else all over the world. David, the Philistines, and Goliath. Generally, we're talking about David and mention the Philistines and the Goliath, but we don't get much background about the Philistines and about Goliath. Today we are. Who are the Philistines? Where did they come from? Who is Goliath? Where did he come from? So young David, we're not talking about, David and Bathsheba or anything. Young David, he's the great-grandson of Ruth and Boaz. He was of the tribe of Judah. He would become the next king. You kind of wonder, it was prophesied in Genesis that the scepter would come out of Judah. So why did God pick a Benjamite for the first king? Saul was, of course, of the tribe of Benjamin. Youngest of 8 sons of Jesse, we're told. And there were also 2 daughters, Abigail and Zeruiah. And Zeruiah was the mother of Joab, David's general. So Joab was the nephew of David. He tended his father's flocks. He was a musician and a poet. You imagine you're out there with the sheep, and he probably played and sang to them to soothe them. And he's given credit for 75 of the 150 psalms. There he is playing the lyre, and from what I read, it had 16 strings. And then he was anointed by Samuel as Saul's replacement. We all well know this. And then after he was anointed, we're told that the Spirit of the Lord that Saul did have rushed upon him. So you kind of want, we read with regard to Samson that when he slew the lion, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. So you kind of wondered, is David doing this with the lion and the bear after he was anointed or before? Of course, David was not a perfect person. No one was without sin except for Jesus. He was a man of God's own heart, but God chastened him several times. David, you do not do good. But David was humble. He asked the Lord for forgiveness. Psalm 51, he said, Lord, please don't take your Spirit away from me. You have a comment?
When Saul was first made king, God's Spirit came upon him, and it seemed to be having a positive effect in his life, but I think there is plenty of evidence that he chose to reject the Spirit's influence in his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Was he actually thinking he was doing well by bringing back the king of the Amalekites, bringing that? So I brought him back to sacrifice. What does Samuel say? Better to obey than to sacrifice. Yes. So who were the Philistines? First mention of them is in the Table of Nations, Genesis 10:14. Tower of Babel. Everyone spoke the same language. Then God gave different languages, and then we're listed the Table of Nations, and then 70 nations came out of that scattering. They came to Philistia. We're told in Jeremiah and Amos that they came to Palestine, the place that they were here in 1 Samuel, from Caphtor, which is the island of Crete. Archaeologists have traced them to the Aegean before they came to Crete. The Philistines had a beautiful and distinctive pottery. And they are also known for their metallurgy, so that's likely how the archaeologists could trace the Philistines back to Crete and back to the Aegean around Greece. During the time of the Judges, the Egyptian records show that these sea peoples, which included the Philistines, came from Crete and Cyprus, and they tried to invade Egypt. But the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, was able to drive them off 2 times, 2 invasions. The Philistines, they weren't a united people. They had like 5 warlords, 5 lords serving in those 5 cities there. And it's believed that the group that was in our lesson today fighting the Israelites were from Gath and Ekron, because that's where the Philistines ran off to once Goliath was killed. And then in the book of Judges, Samson killed all 5 of these when the temple there was destroyed. But obviously they got, he didn't destroy all the Philistines, so they got more leaders there. And this shows where they came from here. There were 2 groups. One, the first one came here from the Aegean, came down this way. They tried to evade this way. There was a battle. They lost. And then the other one came down this way. This one's a little bit closer. So they were defeated here 1178. Then this is the group from Crete. They came down. They were defeated 1175 BC. And then once they realized, hey, we can't take Egypt, then they came over here and then settled in the area here along Gaza, where they are in our lesson today. So it's the area in red. Goliath, his ancestry. So we're just going to talk about where he came from, and then a little bit more about him in particular. He was a giant, strong and tall. We're going to look at Deuteronomy here. This is right before the Israelites are going to go across the Jordan, and Moses is letting them know what's going to go on. He's not going on with them. Joshua will do them, but he says pretty much the same thing that the 10 spies did. The people are strong and tall. They're Anakites. You've heard it said, those 10 spies, who can stand up against the Anakites? Well, you can't, but God can. And God will do it through you. He will destroy them. So the Anakites. So let's go back to Numbers 13. This is the 10 spies, the 12. We can't attack these people. They're stronger than us. They're great size. We saw the Nephilim there. The Nephilim, the Anakites descended from the Nephilim. So we've gone back 40 years. Let's go back centuries to the time of Noah. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also those days before the flood, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. So what happened to these Anakites? Joshua went and destroyed the Anakites. So why are there still tall people? Joshua totally destroyed them and their towns. But he only did it in the territory that the Israelites were to, only in the land of promise.
It was regional.
Only in their area, yeah. Only in their area. So he succeeded. He did what the Lord told him. The Lord told him, this is the area that you're to take, and he did that. No Anakites were left in Israel territory, but what? Only in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod did any. And where was Goliath from? Gath. So there were still some there. So here's our setting. 1 Samuel 17, 1 through 3 tells about the forces gathering and all that. But let's go with a picture's worth 1,000 words, and let's show that pictorially. So here we have, there's the Israelite base camp up here. There's the Philistine camp here, and there's a valley in between them with a little brook. And then this shows the path that the Philistines took after Goliath got killed. So some went to Gath and some went to Ekron. That's mentioned in 1 Samuel 17:52. So here's the valley. We have the Philistines here, the Israelites here, and then right in here you see that brook closer to this side, and this brook is where David will get his 5 smooth stones. And then, of course, in this area, down in here, is where Goliath would call out to the Israelites, and he's sort of down there in this valley, so his powerful voice would carry, and all the Israelites would hear him and be scared. Now, why were they fighting? Why were they fighting? We have this here. In the course of time, war broke out. We think this is later. War broke out with the Philistines at Gezer. And at this fight, a giant by the name of Sipai was killed. So once David had killed Goliath, they say, well, those giants can be killed. And then we have 1 Chronicles 25, another battle with the Philistines. In this battle, the Israelites killed Lahmi, who was Goliath's brother. And then finally here, another battle which took place at Gath. And in this battle, David's nephew, Jonathan, kills a giant who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. So, but still we're not told, why were they fighting? Here it tells us why they were fighting. It's spring. What do you do in spring after the rain stops?
Go to war.
Yeah, you go to war. You know, you don't do spring house cleaning, you go to war. And who was killed in this battle? Gets David in trouble. Uriah the Hittite was killed. David told Joab, make sure he gets killed, make it look like an accident. So, springtime is when kings went to war. And if David wouldn't have stayed home, he wouldn't have gotten in trouble. Situation. David has 3 older brothers that are in the battle there. 3 of the 8 sons of Jesse served. David would go back and forth between serving Saul and taking care of the sheep. Remember, David was one of Saul's armor bearers, but he also took care of the sheep. So here's a map that shows Gibeah is where King Saul was located, and Jerusalem, of course, at this time was still under the Jebusites. And David would conquer it, and then this is where David is, and then he goes over here and serves Saul and also brings supplies to his brothers, and he has it's about a 15-mile journey one way. Okay, so he's out there seeing Goliath and saying, you know, instead of us all fighting together down here, let's settle this mano a mano, one person. Only one person has to die. And the winner takes all. Loser serves us and serves our God. Ooh, bad. He came forward twice a day, every morning and evening, and taunts the Israelites. So, were the Israelites and Philistines, were they fighting or were they just out camping? What got done? Nothing. 40 days. So Jesse sends David with grain and bread for his brothers. Sends some, and brings some cheese. He sends them with some cheese for their commanders. He hears Goliath making his insults and challenges. So why is Jesse having to send food? They weren't very well stocked. They didn't have a good supply chain. We see that from 1 Samuel 13:22, this is before this, only Saul and his son had any weapons. Goliath taunts them. You say, tells David, you come to fight me with sticks. You know, he was really insulted when David comes down. He says, am I a dog that you send a child out here to fight me? I want to fight your champion. And then David asks around. He says, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes the disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that should defy the armies of the living God? This is David's first words recorded in Scripture. And he asks, what's the reward? Is he wanted dead or alive? What will be done for the person that kills him? Oh, it makes his brother livid. What will be done for the man? The king will give the man great wealth. He will receive the king's daughter in marriage, and his father's family will be exempt from taxes.
Sure, and read the fine print.
Yeah. But young David, well, he's years off from being married. So, what will be done for the man? What will be done for the boy? He does eventually get the king's daughter later on. Now this is Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, and he burned with anger at him and asked. He burned with anger. The word here in Hebrew is usually the word of God. God's anger was kindled. He was mad at his younger brother. Why have you come down here, and with what did you leave those few sheep in the desert? That lets us know David had some incentive to protect those sheep if they only had a few. I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. Wasn't he a man after God's own heart? And you have come down here to watch the battle. Now Eliab would have a good reason to be upset with David. Samuel comes to Bethlehem, tells Jesse, I've come to anoint one of your sons. Eliab says, oh, I'm going to be the next king. Samuel sees Eliab. He's tall. He's good looking. Just like Saul, he says, okay, that's the man. No. Keep on going, keep on going, keep on going. He's gone through all of them. Asked Jesse, isn't there another one? You have another one? Well, there's David. He's out in the sheep. You don't want him. He says, call him. We're not going to eat until he comes. And the Lord says, anoint him. So he does. So can you imagine how Eliab feels about his young pipsqueak brother chosen by the Lord over him? It just doesn't seem right. So I think Eliab is a little bit sore with his younger brother here. So David now takes some initiative. Bold volunteer. He volunteers. King Saul, skeptical that this boy can do the job. And then David's confident response. What David said was overheard. Well, what did he say? He asked, what's going to be done for the person that kills this Philistine? And it is that kills this Goliath, and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. That shows how desperate they were, doesn't it? Somebody overhears this boy saying that, and he reports it to Saul. He should, some little boy's talking, don't report that. But he reports it to Saul, and Saul is, good, send him to me. And then he sees this young boy. David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. I'll go and fight him. What happens when Goliath chews him up for dinner? What are the implications? What does the loser have to do? They have to serve the Philistines. They have to worship their God. So Saul is kind of hesitant. Saul replied, you are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a boy, and he has been a fighting man since he was a boy. He has months, years of time over you. You are what? Only a boy. How old was David? guesses? He has 3 older brothers who are fighting. If you go back to, Numbers and all that, when they take a census of the fighting men, it is those 20 and older. 20 and older to be a fighting man. So 3 of David's brothers are 20 and older. So, 5 are 19 and younger. And David is the youngest. There's also 2 sisters. So if you think that the sisters, one, Zeruiah is the mother of Joab. She's probably over 20, but you don't know about the other ones. So as long as there were no twins, David would be at most 15. At most. Probably even younger. That's his mother having a child every year. Now we don't know, did Jesse have more than one wife? We're not told. We're not told who David's mother is. There's traditionally, they have someone named, but we're not told in the Bible who his mother was. But David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or bear came and carried off the sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. Okay, so his primary, we know from the brother that they didn't have that many sheep, so every sheep was precious. I went and rescued the sheep from its mouth. So his first goal was not, don't kill the lion or the bear, rescue the sheep. And then if he rescued the sheep and the lion bear ran off, good. He would only kill it, though, then if the lion or bear went after him. Because he realized, well, the lion or the bear, they're carnivores. They're just doing what they're doing. So as long as they don't attack me, I won't get after them. Your servant has killed both lion and bear. It mentions it twice. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, and because he has defiled the armies of the living God, the Lord who delivered me, who's he giving credit to? The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. So he's making a greater to lesser argument. If I can fight a bear, if I can fight a lion, I can fight this oversized man, and the Lord will be with me. The Lord will be with me. So he's talking about the lion and the bear. David has something else in the back of his mind. What is it that he couldn't tell Saul?
I'm the next king of Israel.
Yes. Well, Saul, your servant has been chosen by the Lord to be the next king of Israel. The Lord sent Samuel to Bethlehem, and he's anointed me as the next king. From that day forward, the Spirit of the Lord, you remember that Spirit of the Lord, it used to be on you? It's now on me. So if I'm going to be the next king of Israel, Goliath cannot kill me. So how would Saul have taken that? Saul is thinking Jonathan's going to be the next king of Israel. And Samuel was afraid to go and anoint David. He tells the Lord, what I'm doing, that's treason. Saul will kill me if he knows I'm doing that. What deadly paws has God delivered you from? You look at that grizzly there, because 6% of the people said that they could defeat a grizzly bear. I know if you're hiking in grizzly country, you make a lot of noise, don't you, on that trail? You don't want to disturb a grizzly or a moose. Think of Jesus. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. The hireling runs away. He says, I'm not going to risk my life, but the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. So who is Goliath? We talked about his ancestry. Lived among the Philistines, but probably not a Philistine by lineage. We talked probably an Anakite. But he calls himself a Philistine because he lived among them, probably born in the area of the Philistines.
It's interesting that the word Philistine is synonymous with like words like dope, unintelligent, etc.
Yeah. Being called a Philistine, sort of like being called a Cretan, you know, just not a good thing. Called a Gittite, 1 Chronicles 25. All Gittite mean, it's not a, that just means he's from Gath. Lives in Gath. The giants, we know, were living in Gath. Joshua had driven out all the giants from the promised land, and some went to Gath, Ekron, and Ashdod. So there were giants there. So that's where he's living. He was a champion of the Philistine army, a fighting man from his youth. He was noted for his height and his strength. Generally, when we're talking about Goliath, we're just talking about his height. That's the thing that gets mentioned. He was a tall guy. He had great strength because he carried all this armor. How tall was he? Well, it depends on what you're reading. It depends. Here's ESV, 6 cubits and a span. So what's a cubit? What's a cubit? 18 inches. It's the distance. It's the distance from here to here. A span, you spread out your thumb and your little finger. A span is that distance. Usually about 9 inches. So 6 cubits in a span, ESV. NIV, over 9 feet tall. Over 9 feet tall. Now if you go to the New English translation, he was close to 7 feet tall. So there's a 3-foot difference between here and here. So there he is, 9 feet 9 inches. That's the Masoretic text. That's the text that many of our Bibles use. The King James used the Masoretic text. It was produced 9th century AD. Now the Septuagint and Dead Sea Scrolls and Josephus have 6 feet 9 inches. Septuagint and Dead Sea Scrolls are 2 early independent sources. Josephus is not independent because all he's doing is quoting the Septuagint. So they have 6 feet 9 inches. And if you're looking at an English translation of the Septuagint, we have, this is 1 Kings 17:4. In the Septuagint, that's the first work that divides Samuel and Kings into 2 separate books. 1st and 2nd Kingdoms are 1st and 2nd Samuel. 2nd and 3rd Kingdoms are 1st and 2nd King. So it says, a strong man came from out of the Philistines' camp. His name was Goliath. He was from Gath. His height was 4 arm lengths and a span. So arm length, we said, was a cubit. So that's where we get the 6 feet 9 inches. And scholars believe that, generally, that the 2 independent here's the time period. 2 independent sources from 3rd to 1st century BC is more credible than the one source 1,000 years later in the Masoretic text. But perspective matters. It's not how tall he was, it's the height differential between him and David. So, 9 feet 9 inches or 6 feet 9 inches, both are tall. When average height of an adult male during this time was between 5 foot and 5'3". So, David was a youth, young boy, so he's probably closer to 5 foot. Saul, they said his shoulder was about the same height as other people. So even if Goliath was only 6'9" and David is 5 foot, he'd still be looking way up at him. He was armed with the latest technology, and he was physically powerful. His armor and weapons weighed about 160 pounds, more than the average man weighed. And it's interesting here, in the weight of the armor, 160 pounds, the Masoretic text, Dead Sea Scrolls, and Septuagint all agree with that. There they all agree. It's just in the height they disagree. The Philistines controlled all the metallurgy. They had the blacksmiths, and they would not allow the Israelites to have blacksmiths because they didn't want them to arm themselves for war. And you had to go to the Philistines if you wanted any of your farm implements, plowshares, sharpened. They kept a tight control on the ability to work metal. Did Goliath have any weaknesses? He was tall and lumbering. He did not have the quickness and agility of the smaller David. David was really spry and he could move around. His helmet, bronze helmet that limited his peripheral vision. So he could not see as well as David could. And then there's the hereditary gigantism. There's an article in the Ulster Medical Journal talked about some possible problems that gigantism caused to people, particularly pituitary gland disorder. And then we read of that one person that was killed by David's nephew, who was born abnormality. He had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each hand. So there were some problems with Goliath physically in his genetic makeup. Courage of the lion. Goliath's insults, 3 types of insults theologically. He criticized their God. He says, you're going to worship our God. Socially, he criticized Saul. He's not a good leader. And militarily, he says, you guys can't, your army can't handle me. Just send your champion down here and just the 2 of us will fight. So at David's taunt, the fighters' movements, and David's victory, there's the Duke. Who can argue with the Duke, right? Yeah. Courage is being scared to death, but still saddling up. David said to the Philistines, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. So he comes with God. He doesn't even mention the sling. He's not going to defeat him with the sling. He's going to defeat him in the name of God Almighty. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. Today I will give your carcasses, the Philistine army, to the birds of the air. So essentially, David here is just repeating the taunts that Goliath made to him. He's repeating, what you said you're going to do to me, I'm going to do to you. And
only better.
Yeah, only better. I'm going to cut off your head, and that's all I'll do. As the Philistines moved closer to it, as the Philistine, David ran quickly toward the battle line. So there's his agility, his quickness, maybe moving to the side so his helmet is cutting off his peripheral. He reaches into the bag. He takes out one of those 5 stones that he got from the brook, and he slings it toward the Philistine. He's got a small target that he can hit because of that helmet. So the stone struck him in the forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. And we're told that he gets killed when David takes the sword and cuts his head off. So there's the stone. So David triumphed over the Philistine with the sling and the stone. He struck down the Philistine and killed him. So what are some of the spiritual weapons that Christians have? Just read that. That's 2 Corinthians 10, 3-5 that talks about that. Thought to remember, make sure others know whom you serve. David let Goliath and the Philistine army know that he served the Lord, and it was not him that was triumphant, it was the Lord. Next week, family of faith. And we're looking at Matthew chapter 1, verses 1 through 17. All right. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. In childhood, little rhyme, sticks and stones may break my bones. They say that's rooted in, out of the biblical text.